Welcome back to GameScoop. I'm your host, Damon Hatfield. This is Justin Davis.
Brap.
That's Mitch Dyer, who is celebrating his 1 year anniversary here in the IGN office.
1 year.
And this is Colin Moriarty.
Hello.
Gentlemen, we are
Thank
on the precipice of a next generation of consoles. Announcements are imminent.
Indeed.
And we're hearing rumors now that the next Xbox, be it called the 720, the Durango, or just Xbox.
Can we start calling it the Xbox banana backflips?
Nope, you cannot. Whatever it's called,
tried,
we're
Colin.
hearing a rumor that it will require a constant internet connection. It will always have to be online. Obviously, if this is true, it will prove controversial. For that reason, I find it a little hard to believe. The rumor comes from Edge, which, you know,
It's a reputable
Reputable
source.
site.
it is a reputable site, but they just list an anonymous source telling them that. But there would be such backlash, you know. I would just be really surprised if Microsoft did that with their next console.
Right. Like for me, I feel like it's highly unlikely because it's such an alienating thing to do, to say you have to have the internet. You have to be connected to the internet to play single player games, to play anything. Now, on the Xbox 360, obviously Xbox Live is a huge component of it, and we've seen various forms of multiplayer integrate Xbox Live in different ways, whether it's with online passes or different vouchers that come in the box, or things you pay for to access different components of multiplayer. All of that stuff, I guess, makes sense in the context of, hey, I'm online, I'm playing a multiplayer game. If you want to play a single player game, like if I want to play Metal Gear Rising Revengeance, if I want to play Dead Space 3 on my Xbox, I can do that. I don't need an internet connection to do that. And I can enjoy those games totally as pure single player experiences. I feel like it is nearly impossible that Microsoft would say, no, you cannot do that anymore with this new console. You can't play Halo 5's campaign unless you are connected to the internet.
I wonder why, like, what would even be the reasoning for it?
I have no idea. Edge's story says that because of the always online internet connection, therefore used games will not be usable on these platforms or on this specific Xbox. I don't know what the connection is there. It seems like a bit of a leap.
Well, I mean, that's one answer to the question of why.
Sure, but that's
the
that's
one answer to
totally-
the question why is, you know, always online or forcing online is a form of DRM, you know,
Yep,
pretty
verifying
strong.
that you have a disc, that you have a legit copy of a game, that it's new, that you paid for it.
So it locks out used copies.
Yep.
Justin, you were saying earlier that you didn't think it was that bad a deal.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I'm coming around on this topic. My stance on this topic is evolving over time, and I think even on a previous GameScoop, I was very against, you know, not being able to sell used games. But sort of the realization of the epiphany that I had is that my two favorite platforms for, you know, buying and consuming video game content right now are Steam and the App Store. And those are two platforms that already lock out used games. I don't even think about it. You know, they've been that way since day one. You know, you're not actually buying a game, you're buying a license to play the game, and you can't resell it. And that doesn't bother me on those platforms. But for some reason, you know, on an Xbox or on a PlayStation, that idea seems much more abhorrent, I guess.
This rumor came hand in hand with another rumor that, hey, Xbox is going to have 50 gigabyte Blu-rays. That's what they're going to put their games on. So that's obviously that says, hey, there will be retail releases. So when Halo 5 comes out for Xbox 720 or whatever, we're going to have a retail release, presumably a digital release. If it was digital only, I could understand needing the internet. Because if it was the only way you could acquire the games was to be connected, then obviously you have a connection that would let you stay connected to keep playing games. That was a really weird way to phrase all that, but I hope we got there.
There's all kinds of levels of always online. Like Steam is a platform that you know, is always online. You know, it's an online digital distribution platform, but you can play Steam games offline. You know, and sometimes there's some hoops you have to jump through.
Yeah, you have to like specifically deactivate or activate on the offline mode on individual games.
And so things, you know, evolve over time. You know, a lot of Steam games require you know, day one activation. You need to activate it once, and then you can play it offline. The Xbox might have something like that. I mean, we just don't really know at this point. I'm okay with it for that reason, I think. Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't really bother me so much. You know, the point that I made earlier is that an Xbox sucks if it's not online.
I totally disagree. Completely disagree. There are so many amazing single-player experiences that you could buy an Xbox and just have a power cable and a component cable and a controller, and you could get an enormous amount of enjoyment out of just buying single-player games.
For me, playing Xbox is all about signing in, seeing who else is
Who's playing
online,
what.
seeing what they're playing, what they're watching, checking out something to watch on Hulu, you know, watching an episode of Parks and Rec on Hulu, then jumping over to play a game. Maybe checking over my friends' leaderboards on the game. Has anyone beat my score? You know, that's what playing Xbox is to me.
Yeah.
So I agree with Justin that not ever taking your Xbox online seems really weird to me.
Sure.
But I realize that maybe, you know, half of the users out there, maybe more, actually don't.
So I mean,
take
it's a
their
better
system online.
experience. It's a much better
It's
experience.
100% true.
Xbox
yes.
Live is baked into the experience, my personal Xbox experience, to such a degree that I would never, I would get significantly less value from that platform if it was not connected to the internet.
But when Xbox Live goes down, like when there's maintenance, it's not like you can't access the platform anymore. So looking ahead, if Xbox Live goes down on the Xbox 720, suddenly nobody is allowed to play games, if this online thing is true. If you need to be connected and you can't connect, they've bricked your system. It's a useless box.
It's true.
That sucks.
Yeah, that's why I find it hard to believe. What does Colin Moriarty think about all this?
You
I don't
look
know.
deep in thought.
I mean, I'm of two minds of it. I kind of agree with Justin that it's not really a big deal, but it ignores a key infrastructure problem in the United States specifically, which is Xbox's biggest market, in which if I feel like, we live on the coast, we live in a city, we're kind of detached from the reality of most of the country, which is that they do not have cable, like steady cable access. And if only to appeal to everyone, because I would say that a lot of people that don't connect their Xboxes can't. It's not that they don't want to. So people still use dial-up in this country. A lot of people. People still have DSL that is unsteady. A lot of people in this country do. And it's not because we don't have an incredible amount of wealth as a country or whatever we do. It's because the country's huge and there are a lot of people living in rural areas and it's hard to get a steady cable connection in those places. But at the same time, and I was talking to Ryan McCaffrey about this today, I wouldn't be surprised if this was true, even though I don't think they're going to do it. I wouldn't be surprised simply because they want you to be connected so that you spend more money. There's a lot of different marketing reasons to do this. If you're online, then you're browsing, there's this service, you pay a little bit of money for this, there's a game here. It's opening you up to this whole ecosystem that I don't think a lot of people even think about. I think a lot of people still think about consoles as you go into a store, you buy a game, you put the game in, you play the game. But that's really not what it is anymore. There's
Xbox is a marketplace.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and
I
so
mean,
giving people access to that and forcing them in to the marketplace and being like, you have to engage in the marketplace and maybe have something like Steam where you could play it offline, but maybe you have to connect every so often, whatever. I wouldn't be surprised, but there are huge infrastructure problems in the United States. Not in most European countries, not in Japan, but definitely in the United States where something like that would be detrimental to pushing units out the door.
Like, so much of what I do at home, maybe everything, aside from eating, involves the internet. Either I'm surfing
You
the
don't
web.
eat online?
No.
You don't live stream your dinner?
I'm watching YouTube videos, I'm streaming a movie to Netflix. So if my internet went down, if Comcast went down, the one thing that I can do that's digital entertainment, I could still play a game on my Xbox, right? So like, it would be so weird if I just couldn't do that now, going forward with the next console.
Next Game Scoop, let's bring dinner. Let's just eat on Game Scoop.
eating?
We can just
yeah,
start.
30 minutes of that.
Yeah.
I generally think any show where we expect people to listen and watch us talk, we don't want to have food in our mouths. But that's just my.
Just saying, if you want to be all the way online, David.
Oh yeah.
Well,
I think from the
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
from a business perspective, people are howling about used game sales being locked out, but people love Steam to death.
Yeah.
That's a platform that doesn't allow used game sales.
I saw a comment that said, "If this is true, guess I'm buying a Steam box."
Yeah, and it's like
So you'll
Totally
buy
different.
all new games.
Exactly.
I mean, see, but Steam is the example of there being no used games, and so there's price parity. And
this is what I'm saying. Like, there's a certain, Colin, you were talking about a guy you were interacting with on Twitter who said that every single, his entire games library is used games.
so sad.
Sony and developers and publishers got $0 from him. He owns dozens of games.
he's a net negative on Sony.
Yeah, and so
Was he proud of this?
Yeah, well, he was. I don't know if he seemed like he was.
He's just stating, a fact, right? Like, I only buy used games. And so there is a significant chunk of the audience that, look, I will not buy Saints Row for more than $5 or $10. I won't do it, right? And so that, THQ has a decision to make. They can make $0 from that person and let them go buy the game used, or, once or twice a year, they can knock it down to $10 on Steam, and then they get to capture that customer. And that's really the flip side of this used games argument. That's the second half of what I was saying earlier, where the App Store and Steam don't bother me at all for some of their practices that might bother me on Xbox and PlayStation, because they understand Steam games get knocked down to $2.50 or $5.
Sony's
and
adopting
$10.
this in some ways with Plus, right? Like we see every month someone like Plus users get a free game or two. They get discounts on a bunch of new releases.
You could just have Plus never buy a game and be pretty satisfied with what you're getting. I mean, I think that's the point, is that guy on Twitter, Sony doesn't care about that guy. And in fact, if that guy didn't buy a PlayStation, they'd probably prefer it, because they don't make any money on hardware. They make money on software. And if you're connecting to games where there are server costs and you're doing all these things on their network and you're not buying anything from them, then they don't want you. And so I don't think that I don't really think that they're scared of being like, well, the used game guy might not want to buy our next PlayStation, but guess what? We didn't make a goddamn dollar on him in 7 years, so who cares? You know, I think that there's a few things to think about apart from the infrastructure and all these things. Are both companies going to do it? We've heard rumors
That's
about
the
both.
thing. It has to be.
If one is certain that the other is going to do it, then they will both do it.
It can't be just one.
And it's an elegant, and like I said this morning, it's an elegant solution because then there's no way out because PC has been doing this for years. You can't do it on your tablet or your iPhone. You can't buy used games, and now the HD twins in the next gen, you cannot buy used games. So there is no solution. So if one is certain the other's going to do it, and who knows how the hell they'd ever be certain about that, then they're going to do it. You know, because there's no net negative. If one does it and the other doesn't, that's bad.
People will trade. I've said on GameScoop before that people will trade quality for convenience. People will also trade, some of their rights as a consumer for convenience. I'll download a game. You can download Xbox 360 games right now and Wii games, and I'm sitting on my couch. I want to buy this game. I'll pay it and download it. Then I can't resell that game. Right? I don't have a disc that I can then turn into cash later on. But that's more convenient for me, so I'll do it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, but this is
people will trade almost anything for convenience.
Exactly, and that's what I've been saying for a long time because I'm not against used games on a moral level. I just think that it's silly if you want the industry to prosper to continue to like propagate used game sales simply because some may argue the publisher had already been paid for that game, and that's true because the game was already in the wild. But if you were going to buy it anyway, then they would have sold it again. So it sends mixed signals to developers, and I think that the publishers would be right on board with this. I think the only thing that Sony would be afraid of isolating or Microsoft would be afraid of isolating are their retail partners who they rely on to sell consoles, and they have to think about whether it even is relevant. And McCaffrey made a really interesting argument today that Microsoft and Sony might be willing to take a hit, quote unquote, for 2 or 3 years, considering these consoles will last maybe a decade,
Right.
in order to just say there is no solution. This is the reality of the situation. We make these games and we control the means by which you get them. And if you don't want them, then you can go to another marketplace. But here's the thing: the other markets are all the same.
Yeah.
So, it's coming to the reality of the PC market that they've been doing for years. Steam is a great example of a system that creates price parity between games that were more expensive because there's a competitive marketplace now. There's no used games; they're all new, and you have to compete to sell your wares. And I think what people don't realize, and I've said it many times, is yes, it is true, indisputable. Games are cheaper in real money than they've ever been, and they are more expensive to make than they've ever been. And if you make a competitive marketplace where people have to compete, and not everything's $60 or $10, and it meets somewhere in the middle, more games get sold, more money's made, we get more games, everyone's happy. And I think that this kind of situation is going to facilitate that. But whether this ignores another good point, Damon, which is the used game sales thing will solve itself if they let it. And so, because this is the last system we'll get before it's solid state completely, and we don't deal with discs anymore.
Digital only.
It will deal with it itself. And so the question is, are they patient enough to let it do it, or are they just ready to do it?
I mean, that's the thing. Whether this happens now or whether it happens in the future, it's going to happen, right? It's just a matter of how fast is it going to happen.
Yeah, used games are done.
Physical media, if you want to talk about when we all have kids, and they're like, oh man, when games came on discs and movies came on discs, that's going to be the silly thing, right? The world is a digital place.
Yeah, I mean that is inevitable. I think the idea that your console has to be connected online is more the controversial point.
I just go back to it doesn't really bother me because it's such a higher quality experience. I think about a game like Geometry Wars that without those leaderboards, I would not have enjoyed that game in the way that I did. And I think about, even single player games I feel like are more enjoyable if you can enjoy them in a passively multiplayer way. You can, share high scores and trade things back and forth. The recent Need for Speed Most Wanted is a good example.
Yeah,
that game doesn't really have, it does have traditional multiplayer, but the way that I played that game multiplayer was, these notifications pop up that you're doing a single player race, but you did it faster and more efficiently and set a new, speed camera record than somebody else, and then that update gets pushed to them. SSX is another really good example of that.
As games start integrating marketplaces within the game, like with Dead Space 3, for example, you could play that game single player online, but still have access to this wealth of content within the digital marketplace. So this goes to Colin's point of developers and publishers wanting to drive people in the game to keep spending money.
So it doesn't necessarily only need to be a monetary concern. It can be a game design concern as well. If you know when you're designing your game, everyone is going to be connected when you play that game, you can do cool shit. Just from a design perspective, EA did with SSX.
I guess so. And a game like Need for Speed that is so much built around that communal online experience, the people that are playing offline are kind of missing the point of the entire game. So I guess it would solve that problem.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of passively multiplayer games in that way, where you're not playing directly head to head, but it's all asynchronous. And
watching that little dude in Trials at the top of my screen, knowing that Damon is that much farther ahead of me is
that's another
huge motivator.
That's another great example.
Yeah. I was trying to think of another media device that does require a constant connection that we have now.
I mean, I
I
don't know
couldn't-
anyway, but I don't know of
couldn't
any.
think of
I mean, that's an example a lot of people use, and just in the sense that, like, what else makes you do this? You can sell your car, you can do all these things. That's true. That's completely true. And I'm not principally against like used games. Like, it's just.
But here's
There
the
is
thing-
an economic reality to the decisions you're making. Like the game companies have not gotten into selling used games like say the car companies have.
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah.
When the car companies were mad about used game sales, they just started selling used cars,
Game-
and there's no option for the developers to use that.
Game developers made the choice to run away from used game sales, not run towards it. Activision could have been buying their own games back and reselling them and having, like a model like the car companies do, and they chose not to. So.
Yeah, it's just to me, it's inevitable. Like Justin said, it's inevitable. Used games will not exist in a few years. So it's a matter of like how we get to that point. Maybe the most consumer friendly way to get to that point is to just let the system do it itself. But online only mode suggests to me like they want to funnel you and they want you to spend money. But the only reason you would really do that is to make sure games are not being used or sold. But they could also do it with an online pass kind of system where it's just a pass for the game. It's just like you could still buy the disc, but you have a pass instead of unlocking the online mode. It just unlocks everything.
I mean, that convenience can also help with piracy. I mean, it doesn't need to be. It's easy to sort of picture this dark future where it's always on DRM and blah blah blah. But it doesn't need to be that way. Like
The world's in
I know.
ruins.
So it's like you're painting a picture of my current Xbox experience now as a dark future. So.
yeah, I guess that's true. But I mean, people will like the detractors of the people that are worried will. That's
Sure.
the argument that they'll make, right? And it doesn't need to be that way. Like the bright future, the upside of that is I think we will see steeper sales. I think people figure out that. Yeah, like I said, if someone buys Saints Row for $5 on Steam, like, they didn't lose, THQ didn't lose $55 on that. That's a person that, that's the ceiling, that's what they were
Just
willing
an
to
extra
spend.
$5
So,
that they wouldn't have made.
yeah, right. So in, 12 months or 18 months or however it works out, then they'll capture that consumer that they, that they wouldn't have reached before. And that's a sale that would have gone to, on Craigslist in the past, and now it won't. So.
Well, hopefully we won't have to wait too much longer to find out about all this. The PS4 is all but surely being announced on
Yeah, we'll be there
the 20th.
on February 20th, and we'll hopefully have some answers to some of these questions, at least on Sony's side. I just want to encourage Damon. I mean, people to, I say it all the time. I say it on podcasts, beyond, I say it on Twitter all the time. Whatever. If you're displeased with the practices of a company or whatever, if you don't want microtransactions, if you don't want a solid state system, if you don't want something that's online only, like the only way companies will understand what you're saying is if you don't pay them. And like people have to be like very, like. The anti-online pass thing failed. The anti-day one DLC thing failed because people aren't. You can say everything you want on a message board, but it doesn't matter because if
when
the
they
money
see
goes,
that sale for that software, that's all they care
that's
about.
all you're speaking about. So like just with these next systems, if you're that upset about the things that they might or might not do because we don't know, then just don't buy them because that will send the only signal that matters to these guys. We can go round and round and round about all this stuff, but that's all they care about.
Yeah.
There's a famous screenshot of Modern Warfare 2 on Steam where thousands of people joined a boycott Modern Warfare 2 Steam group because they weren't allowing, I think it was custom servers or some feature was turned off. Then when the game launched, I think like 95% of the people in that boycott group were playing the game. They bought the game and were still playing.
Yeah, and so a company like like Activision will just be like, you don't like online passes. This is a very big, daring thing we're going to do with our first game. Oh, it didn't affect the game sales at all. In fact, we're making more money on used game sales because they have to buy it to play the game. We'll keep doing it. The only thing they care about is the bottom line. I mean, because they're a business.
They're going to keep trying to curb those sales, too. They're going to do whatever they can to prevent you from selling your games, from buying used games. And, I mean, this is a logical next step. It's probably going to make a lot of people very mad. But
yeah,
I guess
hopefully,
we'll see.
hopefully we see, bigger, steeper discounts to offset some of that. That's what I'm hoping.
Oh, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, I think with the new PlayStation Network, the new Xbox Live stuff, and with Steam, you're going to see so many games are going to get cheaper.
It's like Steam. Like Steam is great about that.
Yep.
There's crazy deals on amazing games in Steam. I think that's what the marketplace on the new consoles will look like too.
This problem will solve itself, I think.
Thanks, guys. These are very interesting times for video games. We'll continue talking about them right here on GameScoop.